Let's get some reaction now. We speak to senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance, Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, to give us an overview of the 2024 elections. Dr. Ndlovu, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. We've just listened to homeless young people as well as sex workers saying that they are the forgotten electorate, that the system makes them feel neglected. As a result, they will not be voting. What's your sentiment around the so-called, forgotten electorate?
Good evening, Paul, and thank you for having me. I think the sentiments that have been shared, by the people who are on the streets, including sex workers, some of the genuine sentiments that are shared quite largely by South Africans. So we know that South Africa is a highly unequal country, actually top 10 globally. So that would mean that those who remain at the margins of society, like those who live on the streets, as well as the sex workers, but also the majority of South Africans who remain marginalized, who remain poor, they haven't really felt like even the election manifestos that have been put out there by different political parties are really genuinely speaking to some of the issues that they are being affected with. So it is not surprising that every time we are holding these elections, particularly from 2004, I think the ANC had the highest, vote, at least at 70% around 2004. And since then, it has been declining. And it is because of some of these issues where the majority of South Africans feel like they continue to be excluded. And the sentiments that are shared by the marginalized population, they really mean a lot. And they will be reflected even tomorrow as South Africans are going to the ballot box.
Yeah, and this election is said to be highly contested. And of course, with predictions saying that the ANC will decline, what would you say is the overall mood as South Africans head to the polls, young and old? We do know, according to the IEC, that a large number of young people have registered to vote and should, of course, make their mark tomorrow. How would you assess the mood of these elections?
Well, the mood is quite tense, but also coupled, with some sentiments of anxiety. And the anxiety is obviously coming from the fact that I think for the first time we've come too close to the possibility of coalition government at a national level. And for those who are genuinely seeking change, who are wanting to vote, but at the same time reflecting on how the coalition government hasn't been quite working at a local level. But also, the political parties have campaigned. We've seen the highest number, I think, in the history of the IEC coming to register as contenders for these elections, whether at a national level or at a regional level. So we've seen these political parties coming in, which is quite challenging really for a general South African who's trying to make a choice, to say we've got all these choices. But also the question is, do South Africans really have an alternative? Are these political parties coming into the space? The big question is, are they here, for the genuine needs of South Africans, or they're just here to present another layer? And this is the question that is yet to be tested. But also going back to what we were talking about before, to say around the issues of service delivery, corruption, lack of accountable government, even those who are really looking forward to vote, it becomes discouraging. So that will determine whether South Africans are going to show up, especially young people. So I think this is the first time we are having more young people are registering. And these eligible voters are the ones who are positioned to be the change for South Africa that is needed by South Africa. But the question is, are they going, to turn those statistics that are registered with the IEC to the actual vote? And I think we are yet to see that as the elections develop tomorrow.
What about the role of independent candidates? I mean, we've seen a high number of those in this year's election.
Absolutely. So we've seen the high number, you're right, of independent candidates coming to the space as contenders. But also, I think for most South Africans, really, the question is the question of representation. And I'm not quite sure if the majority of South Africans, especially at the rural areas and other marginalized communities, they do understand what elections means at a national level and at a local level, because we have this multi-layered system of voting. I think at that particular level, at a local level, independent candidates, they do stand a chance depending on how far, they've convinced people, particularly from their communities. But I think the question remains at a national level to say, what is the impact when you are casting that vote in terms of, because voting is indeed a game of numbers, as we are looking for these percentages. So it remains a big question in terms of representation, especially within the National Assembly. So those are some of the issues that an ordinary voter in South Africa would consider as they consider in casting their vote.
On the eve of elections, the DA has officially filed papers in the Electoral Court over President Cyril Ramaphosa's Sunday address to the nation in his capacity of head of state. I mean, we heard the party accusing him of abusing the highest office in the land for flagrant electioneering. What do you make of that?
Look, this is a very volatile situation. We are in a very volatile state where the stakes are quite high, both for the ANC but also for the opposition, right? So it is not surprising that we will see these things. Perhaps the timing, was wrong, but also there is an argument to make to say, perhaps as a president of the country, I had the responsibility of encouraging South Africans, to go and vote. But also, I think on the flip side of the coin, there needs to be a realization of the volatile nature of these elections and what it means, especially for the opposition parties who are also contenders with very high stake in these elections, so such that it will be read as electioneering or campaigning on behalf of the country, of the political party, while you are a president for the country.
Very lastly, the special votes that took place over the past 2 days, I mean, some glitches reported, protests in the Eastern Cape, and, some stations in KwaZulu-Natal didn't even have envelopes. Do you think it's an indication of what some of the challenges that can be expected tomorrow on voting day?
Well, absolutely. I think I was listening to the address by the IEC this afternoon in terms of, reporting or giving feedback in terms of what was happening across the country. I think some of these issues can be expected, given that our systems are not yet where we want them to be. There are a whole lot of issues that have been, an inconvenience, but also questioning our state of readiness for these elections. So the amendment on the changes that have been made in terms of the people who cannot vote from where they are not registered. And then that time period, as much as it has been explained that it's for the credibility of these elections to make sure that they are fair and free, but also at the same time, it looks like ignores or overlooks the history of migrant labor in this country in terms of even within those periods, someone can get a job and relocate and move to somewhere else and they couldn't vote this year. So some of these glitches really are quite to be expected, tomorrow. I think the IEC is trying so hard, to retain the credibility of these elections.
Yeah.
But the challenges will always be there. But also, you cannot certify everybody in this process. What needs to be done is that whatever happens, the credibility and integrity of these elections remain upheld at the highest order.
Dr. Ndlovu, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and analysis. Speaking there to Senior Lecturer at Wits University, Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu.